So I hope that was, everyone had a good breakout room session. We're going to start off the Q&A with a question to both James and Ruth, which is, the government has just announced financial support for venues while completely missing support for the artists who perform within them. What does this show about their understanding of the arts, and how can we change this? If we can start with Ruth on that one.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm not sure that that's entirely. I mean, there are other sources of funding for some of the artists, but I think what was in. I mean, I don't know what was in the government's mind, but I'm guessing what was in the government's mind was that there were some fairly major venues that were really in serious danger of going completely under. I mean, we'd already, the Lyceum's dark. Pitlochry was talking the week before last about redundancies. The Tron's gone dark in Glasgow, and the theatres that are owned by a kind of conglomerate in Glasgow are all facing the possibility of permanent closure. So I think what was in their minds with this particular fund was just to try and keep as many of our major receiving houses open as possible.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember the point that Ruth made in her talk earlier, is that this isn't just about the artists; it's about the support workers as well, the technicians and the off stage and behind stage people. And I think my understanding is that this £10 million is going to be distributed and operated by Creative Scotland. So I'm quite sure that there will be a lot of conversations about what kind of jobs that will continue to support and so on. I totally agree that that there's still much more that could be done and probably should be done. And £10 million actually in the scheme of things is not a huge amount of money as things stand. But I think it's a start, and I think it's a very welcome start. It's also perhaps maybe worth adding that not this doesn't apply to everybody, but quite a lot of artists who are self-employed have been able to get some kind of succour from the self-employment support scheme that the UK government has put into operation, and there's going to be a second tranche of that as well. So obviously that doesn't apply to everybody, but quite a lot of us who are self-employed at least are getting some kind of relief, as it were, from that source.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we'll go over to Baz. You had a question on how we persuade young people that there is a future in the arts.
Yes, in this time of a dip, and well, hopefully in the future it will go up again. But how can we persuade the children to still go into the arts if they see that the arts are suffering? And how can we make sure that they get the funding to pursue those careers in the arts?
Will I go first this time?
Yeah.
I think that's a huge question. I mean, I suppose one could also say that there are so many other areas of work that are uncertain at the moment that this doesn't just apply to the arts. One could equally perhaps say, well, how do we persuade young people to go into certain other areas of work as well when the future is so uncertain? And the simple answer is we just don't know. But I think one of the good things that is beginning to emerge out of the present crisis is that younger people who are already involved in the arts, or who have a sort of interest in becoming, in working in the arts, are probably much more savvy than people of my kind of age about how to use the technology, like what we're doing just now, to perhaps be able to get a foothold in performance or in delivery of the work that they do. But it's not an easy question to answer, and I don't think I can even say I do know the answers. I think it's, in a way, it's a kind of wait and see question at the moment, but it doesn't just apply to the arts.
I think when I was talking a wee minute ago in my presentation, and I was talking about the fact that we haven't got proper arts education in schools yet, properly embedded yet. And my firm belief is that if you give people the opportunity to free their imagination and their creativity throughout school, is that no matter what line of work they go into, that will make them more confident. When I say better people, I don't mean better as in, I just mean more rounded people. You know, in another incarnation, I chair the Dewar Arts Awards, which gives grants to young people who have got great potential in any branch of the arts, but they don't have very much in the way of resources to realise their potential. And most of the people that we funded have gone on to have careers in the arts, but the very few people who didn't go on to have careers in the arts, I can say hand on heart that all of them found more satisfying ways of life than they might have done had they not had the opportunity to study within the arts for a period.
Yeah, and can I come back in on that as well? I think the question Bas is asking is really important, but I think again one of the reasons why I touched on the music tuition situation in our schools and education is precisely the point that Ruth's just made. We may be in the future looking at a kind of society where people are not all full-time artists and they're not all full-time workers. You know, we might be looking at, and I don't want to romanticize this too much, a situation where we're all kind of crofters, or more of us are crofters, where we do multiple things and we do some things some of the time, and we maybe are musicians for a few years where we're actually, that's the principal source of our income, but then we become something else for a while, and then we maybe go back into performance at a later stage. I think that the flexibility of work and how it integrates and operates with culture, and that's why I was trying to say this isn't just about people who think of themselves as artists, it's about people who are living ordinary everyday lives, but who also actually have contributions to make to the arts and culture. So it's a long-term thing, but I suspect the way we think about all of this is going to shift quite a lot in the coming years.
Thank you. I think we'll go to Stella next on how we sustain artists during this dormant period to be ready to spring into life. We got Stella? No?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. That was just a question about the fact that artists can't necessarily perform or get funding from what they do just now, but we do need everything involved in the arts to be ready to spring back into life when a different sort of more physical performance is possible. And how do we keep on funding that to make sure it's available?
Stella, you'd also made the point that you'd found more time for reading and engaging in the arts?
Not just me personally. I think there was a general feeling around the group that people had benefited from a bit of time. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people have found some spare time to be creative themselves when they hadn't been creative for a long, long time. So just that's a form of individual education, I suppose. We wondered if that isn't just as important almost as what might be taught in schools, to have the time and space to enjoy that and develop it.
Yeah, but it's also about where you get the appetite to do that. You know, I suspect most of the people that you're talking about who've enjoyed more time to experience, arts activities have already got an interest in that. The very fact that you're here this morning probably argues for that. I'm talking about pulling a switch for children at school, which will give them the kind of appetite that they need in later life. When I was at school, which as you can tell from my hair wasn't yesterday morning, I had an absolutely brilliant English teacher who would march up and down between the desks doing Shakespeare. I mean, not only was he King Lear, but he was Lady Macbeth. I mean, that's how good his imagination was. And as a result of that, that got me into going to the theatre. It got me into reading plays, for heaven's sake. I mean, not to perform them, just for pleasure. And I think it's possible within education to get people to pull a switch like that. I've not yet met anybody who can't name one teacher who was really significant in their life, which is why teachers are so important. As for the making money just now, I mean, I don't know how many of you have been watching the National Theatre of Scotland Scenes for Survival, but I mean, that's just a brilliant initiative. It's great writing, great acting, and more importantly, it's going towards creating a fund that will help people who are less fortunate than the people who've taken part in these mini dramas.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've got very much to add to that. I think the point you're making though about, again, it just, I really agree with what you're saying about people have had a bit more time over the last 3 months, enforced time, and they've had to think about what they're going to do with it. Now, I'm quite sure some folk have used it in a way that, in ways that wouldn't be something that I would want to do, but yes, I've been reading more because I've actually been not going out doing school visits and other things that I should have been doing a tour in England, in the north of England, right back in April with Aidan O'Rourke and Kit Downs, the sort of music and spoken word thing that we do. That was all wiped out, but the bonus for me was I've picked up my guitar and I've started playing that again. I've been reading much more widely, and I've also had time to think about what I'm going to do next in terms of my own work and how that might, what that might be. But I think Ruth's point is that if you don't already have that grounding, if you haven't been inspired to kind of be creative, then it's difficult perhaps just to pick that up from nowhere. But anyway, I think these are all really, really important, useful things that are happening.
Thank you. We're going to ask Kathy Tilbrook now on expanding the model of local arts performances.
Yeah, thank you. And we had a conversation in our group about the fact that we're very lucky in this area. We've got within Comrie, we've got things like Chris's Gigs and the Comrie Cinema, and in Crieff we've got the Strathern Arts Centre, and Ruth was referring to her situation in Kilcreggan. So there are obviously little hubs in rural communities where the arts, we do get these great performers coming, and that works really well. But it's not universal, and there must be lots of communities in Scotland that don't have that kind of provision. So I guess it's about whether Ruth or James have any views on how that could be expanded out. Is it about more subsidy to artists to allow them to do that performance more widely? Is it about pulling together the lessons from the successful places about how they've done it, what you need to be able to do that? Is it sort of producing a guidebook so that other communities can copy it? Have you got any thoughts on how we make sure that is more accessible to other communities?
I was reading just the other day a piece from somebody who's involved in touring theatre, and saying that one of the ways they thought it would have to change was that they would try and get away from this hit and run thing, where they do a performance in, with you, and then they shove everything in a van and they come and do a performance for us, etc. And the person who wrote this was making the point that they didn't really get an opportunity to not to embed themselves in the community, because that's never going to be possible with touring theatre, but to have more of an interaction with them, so that what this person was visualising was that there would be, to use your word, a number of hubs in Scotland which would take in theatre companies or music groups or whatever, but they would build into that various ancillary events so that the community and the performers would have some kind of relationship, which wasn't just a relationship comprising 2 hours one Saturday night. And I think Peter Arnott's point about touring theatre becoming more important is well made, and I also think it's true.
Yeah, and I think the other point there is, a place like Comrie, I know Comrie and Crieff very well, and actually over here as well, and where Ruth is, we are quite resource rich in that respect, but there are huge parts of areas of Scotland which are not resource rich in terms of the culture that comes to them, or the venues and places that they have. I mean, just to take one example, for a long time I used to go to a book festival in West Dunbartonshire called, I think it was called Booked. It's still going, but it's been suspended, I think, this year. And that was run solely by the local authorities' libraries. And it was a brilliant, brilliant festival that ran over two and a half weeks. But one of the reasons why it was so successful was because nothing else happened around that stuff in West Dunbartonshire in the rest of the year. And I still think it's the case that in West Dunbartonshire Council, and I'm not picking on West Dunbartonshire, I just think it's a good example. There isn't a single bookshop in that local authority, and so the libraries had to step in to provide the literary culture, to bring the authors, have the events, go into schools and all that otherwise just wouldn't happen. So I think local authorities have a big role to play here, but I also think local authorities, we may have to have a good look at what it is that they do and how they do it. I didn't have time to put this into my talk, but one of the things about most culture and leisure services now delivered by councils is that they've been hived off into single entity charities, which are kind of also businesses. And I'm not sure if that's the best model. I'm not sure how good the democratic control over that stuff is. But on the other hand, it may be that's a really good jumping off place to try and develop the kind of hubs, a network of hubs across the country that I think would be really beneficial and would help to spread cultural activity and creative activity out, and perhaps try to reach some of the places that really don't see a great deal of it at the moment.
There's another problem here, though, which is not just about local authorities' performance or lack of performance. Everywhere I go, I've been at that West Dunbartonshire Festival as well, James, and it is brilliant, but everywhere I go, the classic example was the Craig Miller Festival in Edinburgh. These happen not because the local authority imposes something. These happen because people locally are inspired to do something about their own situation. And everywhere I go, there's always a handful of people that make things happen. And so it's a two-way street here. You can't, everything that's successful, in my view, is organic and grassroots driven. I don't think you can lay down a template on a local community about how to do things.
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's a two-way process. You cannot impose culture on people in any way that you can impose politics or anything else on them, because they'll not take it if they didn't like it.
I don't know, I'm going to have a go with the politics myself.
Okay, thank you very much. We go over to Kenny Cormack. You had a point on online music education.
Unmute yourself.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
So we were talking about education. I myself am a music teacher, and just looking at one of the positives of the whole situation, there's been a huge amount of online resource available to young musicians to learn. However, that's been restricted quite a lot, either by their access to technology, or, for example, I teach in a couple of private schools, and as soon as lockdown was announced, we rolled out online one-to-one tuition. Nothing much changed there, whereas a lot of my friends who teach in the state sector, they haven't been able to do so just because it couldn't be okayed really on a bureaucratic level, with understandable safeguarding and things like that. There was a huge limit there, and a lot of those kids just aren't receiving their one-to-one lessons weekly now for 3 months. So looking forward to, one, how can we ensure that this great resource is available to everyone, and two, how can we make sure that these safeguarding issues are fast-tracked so that kids can get their online lessons really. That's what we discussed.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to the safeguarding thing and how you fast track that, but I think the point you're making about how, and I know this because I know a couple of other folk who are music teachers who work in both the state and the private sector, and the experience you've just described is pretty much exactly what they've said as well. And I think this is why I said I thought a future Comrie conversation about education and the system of education would be really, really useful, because whenever I've tried to get things to change through some of the work I do in schools, one of the things you realise is that the Scottish education system is like one of those enormous great oil tankers. It takes ages to get anything to shift, and there's an issue there about the size of the structure and the lack of flexibility. And if I'm perfectly honest, I think it's some of those weaknesses and some of that bureaucratic sort of logjam has been really exposed by the last 3 months. And I don't think that the great ship of Scottish education has really come out with garlands all over it as a result of what we've seen. So I think that's a huge issue, and I really hope that the sort of mandarins in Education Scotland and elsewhere are going to be obliged to try to confront some of these issues. I don't know the answers, but I think you've hit on something really, really important.
I think actually I'm slightly different from James on that last point, because I agree that yes, there's a sort of bureaucracy infested system at work. But what I've also noticed in the last 3 months is that all kinds of things that were supposed to be impossible or not doable have suddenly become possible and doable. And and people have changed gears remarkably quickly and become more fleet of foot, not because somebody changed the structure or the rules, but just because they bloody well had to. And necessity has been the mother of all kinds of inventions this last 3 months, I think. What I would like to see the sector do is, when I used to live in Glasgow, I used to see Saturday morning shed loads of Wains all going to the Royal Conservatoires morning schools. And I'm thinking it must be possible for institutions like the Royal Conservatoire and St Mary's Music School and the one in Aberdeen and for them to have online tuition made available to the state sector, and for the state sector to be more receptive to that than they might have been before this crisis.
Thank you very much. This is interesting stuff. I'm now going to go over to Brian McAlpine. I think you have a proposal to make. We got Brian.
Hi there. Given the context of today's discussion, this seems a bit like jumping in with the guerrilla warfare, but because everybody is so supportive and has a willingness and an understanding to be positive about the arts. But given the recent poll that said 70% of people thought working in the arts was the least valuable contribution, I've been talking to a lot of my musician friends, and they're all working really hard online to do concerts, to promote themselves, to keep themselves busy, to entertain people. And because Westminster seem to have absolutely no long-term policy for supporting individuals, I'm floating the idea that we should do, as the writers did in LA, a kind of blanket, take music off our screens, take music off the radio for a period of time to try and get a debate going amongst the people who don't think of the arts as being valuable. I wonder what your take is on that.
I don't like it. I mean, that's a kind of sledgehammer to crack this particular nut, because what about all the people who rely on getting their soul food through the radio and films and TV, who might not have any other opportunity, any other way to access that? I mean, you'd be depriving lots and hundreds of thousands of people of real pleasure who might have no other way of accessing it.
I think the other danger there is that it's almost impossible to get a comprehensive 100% sort of everybody in the same boat on this sort of stuff. So you would I think find, unfortunately, that however strong the feelings were, there would be a percentage of people who would say, well, sorry, I'm going to carry on working. This is an opportunity for me to get some exposure if everybody else is not working. So and I think the platforms that deliver music, through radio, television, and elsewhere, I'm afraid would simply just go to the people who are prepared to do it. So I don't see it really that as a good solution at all. No.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions because there's lots of really interesting ones. But please do keep the debate going. This is the whole idea behind these sessions, is that we continue these conversations in our community and wider community. So please do use the Twitter handle at Comrie Chats and hashtag Comrie Conversations, and the Facebook page as well if you want to rewatch or share. We're looking for suggestions, ideas on how to improve, topics that you'd like to discuss, so please do get in touch via social media or through the email link that you all got the Zoom link from. Thank you so much to James and Ruth, and to everyone who's taken part. This is the third session, and it will be the last session while we take a little break over the summer, and then I think it was late August. We'll be coming back with some fresh conversations for you all, so keep an eye out for those. But we're going to unmute everyone so you can give James and Ruth a big round of applause and say your hellos and your goodbyes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Few familiar
very
faces
much.
here that
Thank you.
from times past. So hello Andrew and hello Norman.
Hi.
Hi, Ruth. Good to see you.
Loads of
That was
familiar
really
faces and
interesting.
nice to see people from further afield like Shetland and Edinburgh.
Yes.
Thank you for letting us be here.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Come again. Come again.
Very good. Thank you
We
very
will.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Folks,
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Charlie,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.